Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to some more Warpforge. And today we're doing a patch video, it's been a long time since I did. Usually I would put up like a community post or something, which I did as well, just kind of checking in on what people think. And when we had some new patches, a month or two ago, it really kind of got me back in the game after things were feeling a little bit stale. And there's a lot going on, and that's also why I figured why not talk about it. Shout out to everyone who checked out that poll that I put up. I really love seeing the engagement there because it just tells me, okay, when we work on these videos, like, folks want to see them, right? So I'm not just putting out stuff that people are maybe a little less interested in. This season I really wanted to get up a video for basically all the rank decks that I did. I pretty much did that aside from doing a full video for Junith because I don't think anyone wants to see that at this point. But GSE, a lot of changes, some noteworthy changes for Ultramarines, less so for Dark Angels, and then quite a few changes for Chaos as well, and particular Warlords really getting highlighted too. So just that's the TLDR, and I put that in a community post as well. But let's dive into the video. We'll throw up some graphics. We'll really talk about these cards and do a little bit of theory crafting on kind of what's to come, or what we're excited to at least try out. So let's dive in. Okay, well, first things first, we got to look at what the changes are for the Adeptus Sororitas here, and there's quite a lot of nerfs. And I anticipated this would likely be the case. I think there's one of these changes in particular that I think folks are understandably a bit worried about. But overall, I think that really it's, Junith has just like crept along further and further to be this really unstoppable force. And the Sororitas reinforcement really kind of put that on the map and also allowed for other Sororitas decks. I think all of them were over 50 to 55% in the meta report. I'll throw that out there as well. And so they're eating good, they're doing well, and really I think the culprit was Junith hitting a really crazy win rate, being able to, grind up to 5k points. But to be fair, Dark Angels were able to do that, and they were only out for like 2 weeks. So there's some important comparison there. But Fury of the Righteous, Erica's talent, I was definitely an advocate for this. Having the stun effect bumped up in terms of the faith requirement. 6 isn't a lot if you think about how Relics operates, right? But now Relic is also getting changed, and so it's a double whammy, and I think that is going to affect them quite a bit. But if you think about it, basically if you started with Prayer and you had Relics, you're pretty much set, right? For Junith, for Erica, to hit that 6 faith breakpoint. And so with the fact that Relic is now, might as well just skip ahead to that and highlight that. It's going down to 3 faith, not 4, right? So that changes the math quite a bit, right? It means that with Prayer on, early turns and Relics, that's going to get you to like 4, maybe 5, right? It's 4 guaranteed, potentially 5 if you're praying and they can't pop the shield off. And so then you're still another 2 faith short of 7 faith for Erica, and it's going to be 8 faith for Junith down here. That's a noticeable change. I do think that you can still have probably, really great draws, and like you get the Sacred Sister, the Sacred Rose card going, where you just drop those units out. You've got 1 or 2 faith, or hopefully you've hit your 3 faith breakpoint, right, with Relics, so that they can flank, give themselves a shield, and then you're kind of off to the races. And not a lot of decks are going to be able to, take the time to deal with that a lot of the time. Usually when I'm playing against Sacred Rose and it comes out and then it drops those units, I know that if they get snowballing, I'm going to lose the game. But a lot of times in reality, you're able to maybe take out one of those, not both, and then, other snowball factors happen. But another big change is to the Rhino, right? So now it's at the end of turn. If any friendly unit is praying, deploy a Sacred Rose Sister. So it's only 1 sister. It will get, obviously, still whatever faith, breakpoints that you have during that turn. as long as something is praying. But that is way different than getting a Sacred Rose Sister for every single unit that's praying. They also will not benefit from Beacon of Faith because they haven't hit the board yet. So really, really big changes. And I do think that a lot of this was necessary. I think I was a pretty big advocate for changing the faith requirement for the warlords because Eric has really, gotten so much utility out of that stun and damage. And the fact that sisters can delay the game, especially in the mid to late game, so much easier than any other faction. But all of these changes combined, I think, will really change the viability of sisters pretty noticeably. Beacon of Faith, change description to +2 health on 4 faith, giving an additional +1 health on 7 faith. Give +2 health to your units 4 faith, give an additional +1 health on 7 faith, give +1. Oh, okay. So they bumped up all the faith requirements on Beacon of Faith. I think, BJ talked about this. I think that's also pretty warranted because I would say in most games, especially into Junith, and Junith is obviously the best utilizer of Beacon of Faith. If they just form a board of like 2 Sisters of Battle and maybe like 1 Sacred Rose or 1 extra unit in Beacon of Faith, and it's like mid game and you don't have Junith, kind of like dead to rights, they pretty much they're going to run away with the game. I think one of the most impactful cards that you really can't do anything about is Beacon of Faith in that matchup. Now, all of these nerfs combined, right, and a lot of this is definitely targeted at Junith being able to snowball. Junith will be less consistent. She will be less explosive in building a board. I still think that with how the game has evolved and the tools that sisters have, the invulnerability, the fact that, relics plus, 1 or 2 decent turns or prayer, being able to shield you or whatever gets you pretty far. When I was playing Judith this last season, just to kind of put this in context, as long as I hit 3 faith, I've got my Sacred Sisters turned on, essentially, right? Especially the card that makes 2 of them. I've got my Seraphim online to answer, some sort of threat on board. And I'm sort of off to the races on 3 faith. And so the fact that really all you had to do was, play Relic or whatever else, and that's still kind of the case to hit some important early game breakpoints, that's not changing, right? Like that's essentially the same. And so I still think, you can't really punish some of that faith accumulation, though their late game, their mid game, let's put it this way, I think their mid game got a lot worse, right? And so what that means is if you are an aggro deck and you have a good start, you do sort of contain things, the mid game's not going to be as hard to navigate, right? Because if they need to get to 7-8 faith to get everything out of Beacon of Faith, to get everything out of their ability, it's going to require, right, they have to have prayer and 2 Relics of St. Catherine to have a shot at that if you are really pressing them on the board. And that is a lot to ask for. So it definitely makes them more fragile. It's going to hurt the consistency of their game plan. I still think that, a good Sororitas player can get pretty far. Some matchups just are going to be really a lot harder than they used to be. And we'll see, right? It's a shame that we don't really have any, penitence sort of stuff going on. Morven's kind of doing okay, but he basically doesn't really have any support within the faction, if we're being real. Aveline just doesn't really operate well with the faction either, so it's kind of just been Junith and Erica. I think people would enjoy playing against Aveline more because it's sort of like nuts and bolts Warpforge. But these 2 sisters have really been just brutalizing the ladder for, I would say at least two seasons, if not 3. So this is tough. I would support pretty much all of these changes except for the Relics of St. Catherine. But I will say, it does feel like if a sister ever plays Relic during the game, right, that their percentage to win goes up by quite a lot. But that's not the Sororitas. That's not like the player's fault or sort of the balance fault. It's the fact that there isn't progressive faith accumulation in the faction, right? So everything tends to revolve around Relics of St. Catherine. So yeah, until we see like a more in-depth kind of rework of Sororitas, we're gonna have balancing issues, I think, like this. This is addressing, I think, the main culprits in a pretty noticeable way. Um, we'll see, but I think definitely the stocks for the Sororitas are going down for this season. But I mean, if you enjoy playing them and this is still your thing, I still think you can do well enough on ladder. If you're going for Global 50 and you still really want to play Sororitas, which I played them to 3.2k last season. It's not for me. I can't do the grindy, I don't know. It's just not my play style. So anyway, I think I'd be interested to see, in the comments Tyler had shared and Aveline had shared that, they feel like it was a little bit overboard, or that I think specifically we all kind of agree that the Relics of St. Catherine nerf is like kind of adding, salt to the wound, and that might just be a little too much. We'll see. So that's the sisters. Okay, and this part is pretty brief, and to be honest, that's sort of what we thought from the meta report sort of summary that we had seen about the Dark Angels. Not a lot of changing of the Angels, but 3 units, I would say 2 units that I figured they would touch. I really think that the Deathwing Knight Master needs changing. Because here's the thing, right? Obviously, Azrael's biggest strength is he can, have a boatload of consistency and has really good units to play with, and can play nuts and bolts Warpforge, the tempo game, the threat game, really well, right? The fact that they have access to a 9-drop that is just so backbreakingly good is a little counterintuitive to me, right? Because it's not that they shouldn't have some sort of late game staying power, but it's the fact that they can make sure, for the most part, unless it's in your starting hand, to be fair, I was cursed with that several times last season, you can just make sure you never see that card, right? And then you increase your ability to see it by turn 9, by 9 energy. And then it really makes it's so punishing for your opponent if they're trying to press you on board. And if they're not pressing you enough, it becomes a complete huge swing. So I think that the fact that the 9-drop is not one of the Terminators they looked at is a little upsetting. To be fair, it is a 9-drop. It's not going to end all games, right? You're not necessarily going to see it at the right time. Having a broken 9-drop is not the same as having a broken 5-drop or 4-drop, right? Because during the average game, you're going to see kind of lower cost powerful cards more than high cost powerful cards. But I think these other ones made sense, right? Like Deathwing Terminator, lowering the health. I was going to say whether it's lowering the health or lowering the attack stats, if you want to keep the teleports doing this kind of flashy come into play effect, then you had to touch those things. So definitely dropping that down to 4 health instead of 5 means that 5 ranged flankers can clear it, right? And so, that's the Snazwagon, that is the Ravenwing Knight guy, the 5-drop. So now you've got a way where yes, it has a great impact when it comes in on 4 or 3, I guess, if you're using Inner Circle. But then it gets mopped up pretty easily before you can maybe tack some other stats on it or other buffs on it. So I think that's a good change. Master Lazarus, I didn't really feel like he was super problematic. I will say if you don't answer him and they drop a teleport unit after that, you're in trouble. So I get that. And Lazarus already has really great stats. So I think, again, they're bringing this more into, okay, now people can play 5 range flankers or 5 melee flankers, and they can trade with these units, right? And I think that actually is a little bit of a nerf to Necrons, right? So now Necrons with their Scorp Tech Destroyer can answer both of these cards. With the Deathwing Terminator, it's not going to die, which is kind of nice. And with Lazarus, it will die, but if you can reanimate it, then you kind of got what you needed. So that's definitely a little bit of a bump to the fact that you can play maybe your average Imatech deck, because Necrons didn't get any love this patch, and you'll be able to deal with some of these, on the ground threats a little bit easier. Deathwing Strike Master, I really like this change. This is the 6 drop, right? So instead of giving +1 melee ranged and health to units, it's only troops now, and I think that's a huge impact. The buffs that you get to accrue on Azrael specifically, and how the matchup plays, it was crazy. Azrael can just sit there, getting card advantaged, not really being punished for it because all of the teleporters are pulling so much weight, and then also you get to add, melee ranged on top of it to him. The +1 health was a nice little bump. Even though it's 1 health in some matchups, that makes a difference. Now the fact that the Strike Master needs a board to really be a better teleport threat, I honestly will probably only run one of this guy now, because he's still an annoying unit, but at 6 energy at that stage in the game, it's not that hard of a unit to clear all the time. And the fact that it's really not doing anything for your Warlord now means that its teleport is less impactful. And I think that was a good change. So you get rewarded if you've got the board going and you're kind of like, gonna snowball that advantage. But if you just play him, plop him on the board by himself, it's kind of like, all right, you played a Hell Brute that's a little less tanky or whatever on 6. That's not that scary. I guess I think changing the 9 energy, like 3 damage to all units and +3 to all units, is a massive swing. And so it's not easy to out tempo Dark Angels already. So their weakness then kind of should be, their late game's maybe not that great. And so I would just say, I think the Darkwing Nightmaster, Knight, whatever he is, the 9 drop, I always get the names confused. I think, giving maybe +1 to your Warlord, maybe +2 to your Warlord, dealing 2 to everything. I just think dealing 3 to everything and +3 to everything is a little overboard for a 9 drop. So remember when 9 drops were bad, guys? Yeah. Not so much anymore, I guess. So that's what we got for the Dark Angels. All right, Ultramarine time, baby. For all those, my first premium campaign that I got courtesy of the Warpforge team when I started doing content was for the Ultramarines. I've always been sticking with them, but there are many seasons I haven't played them for how weak they've been. I'll sort of say up front, I think a lot of these changes are fairly inconsequential, but there is a lot of love for Varro. So let's get into that, right? So Master of Arcana, his baseline ability is being reduced down to 1, and Scryer's Gaze obviously being increased from 0 to 1. So you can still do the classic draw stratagem from your deck the first turn. What's interesting about this is now you can smite on the first turn, right? Smite costs 1 energy, it deals 1 to 3 damage. And so you can potentially clear problematic units a little bit easier. Obviously, it's still random, so you're going to get a little bit of that feels bad when you don't hit the right breakpoint. But I do think that is a pretty noticeable change for him. And, really just being able to kind of like get things maybe moving a little bit sooner for Varro. Like, to me, it does feel like a buff to him specifically for the smite ability, and might allow for him to really shine a bit. I know Ecclesiarch was playing quite a bit of him, just the sort of good old-fashioned Varro vehicles, which used to be like absolutely tier 1 back in the Predator meta. So I don't know. I'm kind of excited to try some Tigurius. It's been a long time. He's my favorite warlord in Ultramarines, so that is pretty interesting. Warsuit going from health on 5 to 6. Never was a huge fan of this card, of this vehicle. I think, there aren't a ton of great vehicles in the 5 slot, so people would run maybe 1 or 2 copies. Going to 6 health is annoying. It is a kind of annoying unit. So that actually might make the cut in some vehicle-centric builds. So that'll be interesting. But on a very different note, we are seeing buffs to 2 of our new legendaries, which I'm happy to see, but I don't think really changes much. So now for Sergeant Gadriel, each one of your units deals 1 to 2 damage to a random enemy, increasing the codex from 1 to 1 to 2. So this is kind of like a mini, Dreadnought Codex ability, right? So it does mean that potentially if you've got just Gaedriel and your Warlord, you could deal a damage spread of 4 to something. I don't think this really makes the infantry aggro builds better enough. Now, if you're snowballing, this thing could be backbreaking. But that's usually not how the game's played out. I actually played a lot of Ultramarines over the last week just because I was wanting to try and figure out a build that can maybe deal with Dark Angels because they've got Inspired Retribution. They have access to, some decent flankers, and maybe you can, find a way to out-tempo them. Spoiler alert, I don't think so. I'm still working on some builds, and I think I've arrived at some decent stuff. But I just don't think, and for Chiron, really similar, right? Rally, deal 1 to 2 damage to a random enemy, repeat each for friendly troop that died since last turn. So they're changing these abilities from 1 to 1 to 2. It will, if it rolls well, you'll see a bit of a difference. But again, I think Chiron's ability is very narrow and situational, and Gaedriel's ability is good if you're winning. It's sort of like a win more card. This thing outright is not going to really turn the tide of the battle by itself. So I will try them. I definitely will, because I would love for these named cool legendaries to be good. But I think the sort of gone are the days of consistent good aggro Ultramarines. Even with Titus, getting buffs, and I think he's one of the better warlords out of them now. You can try and build aggressively, but they're just sort of stuck in this weird mid-range role that just doesn't really work well into a lot of matchups these days. So I just don't know if adding a little bit of a high roll to these abilities is going to be enough for Chiron and Gaedriel to really make the cut for me. But we'll see. I'd be interested to see what people think. Outrider, I like this change. I think we're kind of back to a place where this would not be broken, right? So now it's Codex +1 melee +1 ranged is permanent, right? So it's nice that, I've liked this unit. I have played at least one in most of my builds because it is kind of necessary, especially when you're playing into sisters, right? Like, that's really great, right? Because it can kill a sister and live to tell the tale in the early game. Now it gets that permanent buff, so they're going to have to trade 3 health on it. That's really nice. I would expect more builds to be running Outrider after this change. It was kind of on the cusp of being a good, just flanking, sort of piece to bridge you from, the early game into the mid game. But now having the permanent buff means that it's a little bit more punishing when you get that 2-for-1 trade. So I like that personally. And it means if you get to Tactical Insight, then you're keeping, double the buffs, which is also pretty nice. Blade Guard Sergeant increased range from 1 to 2. But, okay. I don't think that matters too much. Landspeeder lowered range from 5 to 4. So it's back to its kind of, I think it's 3-4 status. And increased health from 4 to 5. That's big, right? The 4 drop, having 5 health, because it's got strike, right? It needs to live to get the benefit. And I've always been kind of sus of this unit because even if you cheapen it with, the legendary vehicle card and things like that, it just never felt like you were really getting the payoff unless you got it armor. Now having 5 health, 4 drop flyer, it's kind of annoying into certain matchups, thinking about chaos, things like that. I like it, and I probably will try Landspeeder a little bit more now that it's got that health buff. And then last but not least, and I don't have this, but I'm definitely going to work towards it. Light cover, change description. I think it's offense or defense card. I can't remember. Give armor 1 and camouflage to a friendly infantry. So armor 1, like you could try and really get a unit snowballing with. I've never really played with the card. So I think in a vacuum that was like okay. But camo is a different story. So the fact that yes, you're really going to have to work with flankers potentially on, let's say, a Vanguard unit or something else to get it off the board. It can't be removed with some sort of non-rally ability. That's pretty nice. So really, I think that Varro got an interesting little shift in his early game kind of power. I think the legendaries are kind of still sort of in question, but then we got some vehicle upgrades for quite a few vehicles: the Landspeeder, Outrider, and the Invictor Warsuit. So, um, yeah, I think that maybe vehicles could come back a little bit, and maybe Varro is the vehicle for the vehicles. Um, really terrible joke. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of excited to try some Ultramarine stuff and maybe have it kind of work. That would be nice. So yeah, those are the boys in blue. Okay, man, we still got quite a lot. So for the Black Legion, we're seeing another kind of like uplifting or highlighting of a warlord, and that's going to be Sylar Hexcorn, who has just been at the bottom tier for so long. So start the game with an Abaddon's Chosen in your hand. Interesting. Talent, a random Black Legion psychic power, right? So that's going to be the thing that you can get. An Infernal Gaze, which is the damage talent, is being lowered from 2 to 1. So we're really kind of like bringing some efficiency to these like multiple different option warlords, which is nice to see. I think that they're getting a little bit more of this kind of like early game push. Something Sylar was pretty good at is if you could roll his +1 melee plus health ability, or is it +2 melee, whichever it is, you could actually get pretty far. You could have some pretty aggressive lines. So and Sylar could be somewhat explosive when you were playing against him. So the fact that Infernal Gaze also costs less just makes him, be able to like, okay, I'm going to use this, see where it hits. Okay, then I'm going to play out some threats, see what I can do from there. So that's really interesting. Seeing those two changes to him, I think, is quite a lot, and honestly might bring him a little bit into the fold as a competitive warlord for Chaos. I still think that Mr. Harker the World Claimer can be really great starting out, but is just like not really a viable warlord anymore. And so it's really been like Galeron Shine for a bit. Abaddon's kind of back into the fold, I would say, and has had some cool iterations, like different kind of combo-y Abaddon builds. I think that actually might be something I try this season. But now I'm kind of getting jazzed for Sylar, who's like, to me, like the polar opposite of Varro. So no surprise that I kind of like him. So I'll be interested to see that. Khorne Berserker ranged from 1 to 2. Don't really think that's moving the needle on that unit for me. Neither with Havoc. These are maybe more like kind of draft changes than anything. Master of Possession, increased range from 3 to 4. Still probably not really doing it. Rights of Possession, right? That's lowered from 3 to 2. Master of Possession is, it makes the unit, pack a little bit more of a punch. It was always, impactful if you got it rolling, but there were just always better things to be playing. But maybe with a combination of these changes, there's a reason or meta choices where that would be better. So kind of interested to see if that changes anything. Sorcerer increased health from 5 to 6. I think that's a good change. That makes the unit stick a little bit more. Child of Torment increased health from 6 to 7. Not really a unit we were running. It makes a difference. The health changes are definitely bigger to me than other stat changes. So, maybe that's something you want to run. Chaos Lord, change description to when you deploy a troop, give it a random Dark Pact, and Rally, gain a random Dark Pact. Sure. Yeah, I don't really know that we were running this unit. So again, maybe these are a little bit more for draft, or sort of will benefit draft more than they will constructed. Demonic Pact. This is, I think, probably the biggest change. Give invulnerable to your warlord until your next turn, which we know is a powerful effect, especially for Chaos in particular. I think about how many games I have against Chaos that are pretty close, and it's kind of just down to, can they push through with Helldrake Strike? Do they have the flank threat here? Do they have the Hellbrute threat here? And the fact that Demonic Pact is essentially a buy a full turn cycle worth of time and help you control the board in a faction that has some really great board clearing tools, right? So you get the invulnerable and give vulnerable to all enemy troops means even if it's just your warlord, you're going to be able to kill something with 4 health. But between, Traitorous Hate, between Spawndom, right, this just means probably like a full board clear, depending on what your opponent has deployed. So this gives Chaos a really scary kind of mid to late game threat that, okay, you're racing me, which is usually what you have to do against Abaddon. Like, you have to kind of like pressure and keep your life total high so that if they have a really good turn with Helldrake Strike or something like that, you're not blown out of the water. But now they could, on 8 or 9 energy, play a problematic 4 or 5 drop and do that. Or like set up, I think of probably one of the biggest win conditions for Chaos tends to be something like Warp Talon, right? You get to play Warp Talon, you get to shield yourself, right, from dying, and then just dump all your Dark Pacts into your Warp Talon and Murderous Desires and win, right? So that's really wild. So I think Demonic Pact, no one ever played it. This is probably going to be a staple legendary. It will benefit every single Chaos deck. So that's big news. Spreading Corruption, I'm loving seeing a bit of love to cards that I had also revealed that never saw the light of day. Lower cost from 4 to 3. So 3 energy for vulnerable 4 that can then spread. So this does mean with Spawndom, you've got a full board clear on 6 energy. That's pretty good. I think vulnerable, really who benefits the most is Galaron, right? Because every time a unit that's vulnerable dies, he also gains a life, which is very, very relevant in some of these particularly tempo aggro matchups. I wouldn't really expect to see Spreading Corruption outside of Galaron. You could run it, as like an alternate kind of removal source. It does seem a little bit better than the execution, right? Kill a random kill a damaged troop. Spreading Corruption is a little bit better than that. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see more play with that. Hellfire Pit being reduced from 1 to 0, really nice. I mean, just being able to clear stuff even easier, especially as Galaron. With that, a really problematic unit, maybe a stealth unit, just bringing a little bit more efficiency to the Black Legion. I think that's really nice. And Throne of the Heretics. So choose a Black Legion troop, put it into your hand. It costs 1 less. I don't have this card, so can't really speak to it. I don't think anyone ever chooses it. But choosing a Black Legion troop and putting it into your hand, and it costs 1 less, feels like it could be impactful. Feels like it would do pretty well in some matchups with as Abaddon. I mean, honestly, Abaddon, Sylar, and Galaron all have abilities to buff troops. So that actually feels pretty nice. I mean, Harkin also is kind of a part of that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see like a little bit more of a dive into cards that, just generally don't see play, even if it doesn't bring them fully into the meta. It just means that if you start and you're like, I want to play Black Legion, you could play the cool Sorcerer Possession package and not be as punished as you were before. So it's really nice for new players, and who knows, maybe through some tinkering, we find like some pretty busted Sylar build or something like that. Honestly, I haven't really chosen my factions to grind with to get top 50 this season, but if I find a good Ultramarine build and a good Black Legion build, I might go with that because I'm excited to really test them. But before I get ahead of myself, we got one more faction to go with quite a lot of changes. So thanks for sticking with me. If you're still here in the video so far, let's check out the Genestealer Cults. Okay, last but certainly not least, we've got quite a few changes to the Genestealer Cults. And it's funny when I put out that poll asking what people wanted to see. It's just been a while since I really played Genestealers. I've kind of been interested in trying some more combo-y stuff with like Safa this season, but we've got even more options. So the Patriarch, a 9-drop that never sees the light of day. Increase cost from 9 to 14. Okay. Change description to ambush, just like I was ambushed by my cat. Give +3 melee, +3 range to all your units. talent, Deadliest Killer, costs 1 less for each card in your hand. Oh, sorry, you're right. Deadliest Killer. So everything's the same, except the cost is increased, but it now has the text cost 1 less for each card in the enemy hand. Very interesting change, right? So Norn Emissary is the only other card that we have that kind of operates this way. I think this could be something, right? And so, I mean, you just get rewarded now, or Patriarch gets rewarded now for running the best units. Biophagus is an excellent card, right? You've also got the 2-drop, right, that generates a sabotage as well. So I could see that there are lines where you're able to have some decent swings where people are getting sabotages out to their hand, or maybe they're playing like kind of a greedy build and they're not really playing for tempo, and Patriarch comes down, and I don't know. I mean, that could be really, really scary. So I think there's a big question mark here for me. It's exciting to think that Patriarch could have some kind of cool combo-y, potential. I really hope that they tested this, and so it's not like broken, because that's going to feel really bad if that's the case. But Patriarch was never played, so I'm excited to see how that goes. Another legendary that they're looking at, which definitely saw, I would say, less play as well, which is Living Icon. So now your Warlord gains strike, lower the cost of a random troop in your hand by 1, and draw a troop. So it's going to discount what's in your hand first, then it'll draw a troop. This, to me, feels like a Malik buff, right? Because Malik has suffered the most. He is the starter Warlord. I've seen people play builds of him. I have lost to him occasionally here or there. He can play the tempo game decently, but this is such a boon to him. It's also probably a bit of a boon to Infestation, which I know people don't like because Infestation was truly infesting the ladder at the start with Genestealers because it was really, really hard to deal with. This does make Infestation more viable, right? Because yes, it costs 7 energy. You still have to get to that breakpoint, but now it's lowering the cost of troops that would be harder to cast with the discount off of Infestation. And so you're dropping their cost down. And so, yeah, I think Living Icon is going to see more play with Safa Infestation combo potentially. But also, I think Malik now actually has a way to kind of have some staying power in the game, which I think is much more exciting to me. Perfect Host, never really played this card. Lower cost from 3 to 2. I don't really think that's... I don't know. There's a lot of stuff with Genestealers where there are these really crazy combos, and unless you really go out and try them and test them and iterate on them, you're not going to know. So maybe Perfect Host does something. Kind of feels similarly about Open Insurrection, which is, it was kind of a dud, right? I was kind of comparing this card to the Deathwing Assault and being like, hey, let's take some tips from Deathwing Assault. And I wonder if that's maybe why they dropped the cost from 4 to 3. Open Insurrection, 3 energy, invulnerable to all troops, trigger your uprising abilities. Where does this card fit? It pairs well with Uprising combo for Infestation. That's kind of about it. You could play it in Tempo Magus. Maybe it deserves like a slot if that's the case. I don't really know if this card will be good enough just with the cost reduction, because it's only for the turn for invulnerable, right? And it's, you get those uprising abilities. Yeah, just that one turn. Okay, I know I've been doing this video for a long time when my cat needs so much attention. All right, let's get through the last of these. Acolyte Specialist, increased health from 4 to 5. All right, not really an ambush troop I was super hyped for. 5 health is important, though, on 4. So I think that could be something. Hulking Aberrant, increased health from 6 to 7. Yeah, I just don't love these Aberrants, to be honest. So Abominant, increased melee from 7 to 8 health, or 7 to 8, and health from 7 to 8. Yeah, I don't think we're running these cards, to be honest, but maybe I'll be wrong. Some of the Cult, lower cost from 4 to 3. in theory, felt like it would play well with Uprising. I still don't think the cost reduction is really going to do it. It is a 2-for-1. It is 3 energy. You're getting a good cost benefit, right? Because now you're getting 4 energy troops for 3. Maybe there's something there, but I'm not quite sure. So the defense card, Pilfered Supplies, change the description to choose a sabotage and add it to your opponent's hand. So now it lets you choose the sabotage. So pretty much always, right? Like the 2 most impactful sabotages are propaganda and poison supplies. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is worth taking if you're trying for like Patriarch combo. Maybe something like that. I don't know. Rusted Vent, probably my favorite defense card. Change description to create a random troop with ambush in your hand. It costs 2 less, so you can't choose the troop, which is unfortunate because you actually can get legendaries off this, right? So you can get Sanctus, which is pretty nuts. But a 2 cost reduction means that even the 4-drop ambushers, which are not particularly good, although some did get a health bump here, right, with the Acolyte Specialist, you can play them on turn 1. So that's kind of nice. I think the Genestealers are getting a little bit of a nice bump this patch. I don't know if the whole Patriarch thing will work out. I think Living Icon definitely got noticeably better and really might put their combo potential back on the map and let Malak players actually have a chance at winning, especially matchups into the late game, which is something where they just run out of gas and they're not doing enough. I'm not so sure about any of these other changes. I'm not really sure things like Perfect Host, Open Insurrection, the Aberrant, the Abominant, the Summon the Cult. I don't really know if any of those become more viable for Constructed. I do think the Pilfered Supplies and Rusted Vent have a little bit of power tacked onto them. So that's kind of nice. I'll be interested. I mean, I think I'm going to try some Malak. Why not? And I think we'll probably try some Safa combo. And maybe Magus also comes back into the fold a little bit with some of the stratagem changes. I mean, Living Icon, I also think could be nice for him because you're going to have a bunch of troops in your hand, right? So that's kind of nice. Some interesting changes for the Colts. We will see if they can continue to spread the good word of their Star-Lord, coming to a Warforge near you. All right, folks, that's what I got for you today. So the forces of chaos rise in a New Balance update. We will see if Sylar lives up to the hype. We'll see if Varro makes an appearance. We'll probably see less Sororitas to some degree. I don't think Dark Angels are really going to go away in a big way. But I think I would say the 3 most exciting things are, is there something there for Ultramarines? Is there something there for Black Legion? And is there something there for Genestealers to kind of make a big comeback? I am sad to see that we didn't see any changes to AM, the Astra Militarum. I'm a little sad to see we didn't see any changes to Necrons. This was a pretty big patch. I was expecting nerfs of the top 2 factions and maybe, a little bump here and there to a couple other ones. Also, Orcs, have a lot of pretty bad units too, so like they could use a bit of that treatment. So I'm glad that they really did comb through a bit of Black Legion, a little bit of Ultramarines, a little bit of Genestealers to kind of be like, you know what, we've got legendaries that are not playable, we've got warlords that feel very unplayable. So it's good to see that there was a little bit more ambition in this patch to start the new year. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for sticking with the video if you're still here. I know it's a long one, but there was a lot to talk about, and I think, if anything, it's got me sort of spinning my wheels, getting the gears turning for new builds and new decks, which is always exciting, for a new season. So we'll see this patch, I imagine, drop Monday. I'm recording as of Saturday. Hope to see you guys there. Hope to see you in the streams. We'll definitely be getting some new decks up there. Hopefully they'll be good. I don't know. I've been banging my head against the wall with Ultramarines for like a week trying to iterate. So we'll see if there's something there. But thanks so much for sticking with me, as always, me and my cat, Bluebell. And I will see you guys next time.